Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Good afternoon. It's Susan Coffin for Attitude Magazine. Today we're very, very happy to have Terry Matlen with us. Terry is a pioneer in the topic of moms with ADD. She has been an advocate for moms with ADD, offering tips, inspiration, and very practical resources at her site, addconsults.com. She's the author of a wonderful book of tips for women with ADD, which you can find on Amazon, and I urge you to do so. So with that, Terry, I'm happy to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Susan, and thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks for the introduction, too, and I'm just going to briefly explain how I got into the field of ADHD and women with ADHD and then moms with ADHD. And to start, I am a woman with ADHD, and I am a mother of a daughter that has ADHD and other special needs, and I'm also the mother of another daughter who does not have ADHD. So I found that in my work, doing a lot of nonprofit work with CHAD and ADA and other agencies, organizations, that women and moms were really feeling left out, that they were so overwhelmed they didn't know how to manage day-to-day activities. And from the amount of contact I got through my work, I realized, this was an area that was really in need of resources and help. So I developed ADConsults.com. I wrote the book Survival Tips for Women with ADHD, and I do a lot of presentations locally and nationally. So I'm here today to answer your questions, and just know that I've lived most of what you are going to ask me about. I see things from, all sides, having ADD myself, and I'm really glad that you're all here today to work together and see what we can come up with to help solve some of your problems.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Here's the first question. And I would say that this is a question which was echoed by a number of questioners. And she says, I would love some suggestions for how to keep the structure that my ADHD daughter really needs. I have a hard time maintaining any sort of structure for myself, much less one for her. I can make a plan, but it's just really hard to stick to it. Getting into a routine is very difficult.
That's probably one of the biggest questions I get, and it's there's not a politically correct way of saying how does the blind lead the blind. But that's kind of what happens when the mom has ADHD and the children have ADHD. If the mom can't figure out how to structure her own day, how does she help structure her child's day? The number one point that I'd like to raise with this kind of question is, first of all, are you and your child adequately treated for your ADHD? That means if your doctor recommended medication, are you taking the medication? Have you been formally diagnosed? Has your child been formally diagnosed? If the answer is yes to all those things, then we need to look deeper into what is going wrong, because asking me how to structure your home is like so broad of a question, it's impossible to answer specifically. But one tip is to, other than making sure that you have, been appropriately treated, is to look at the big picture and start narrowing it down. Okay, when you say that you can't structure your house, your home, your child, school, and all that, take a piece of paper and start writing down the exact areas that you are just, walking into a door, walking into a wall. Is it that you're overwhelmed with the papers your child brings home? Is it that his clothes are laying all over the floor? Is it that you can't get them to sit down at the dinner table? It's such a broad question that you need to narrow it down, and it's a great way to brainstorm with the entire family and then start researching, reading books, reading websites like at Attitude, and learning new strategies on how do you structure your family and your home. So it's a very broad topic with a lot of different ways to, we'll do more, questions and answers throughout, and I'll have more specifics. But I need, more specific questions, because there is no one answer other than acknowledging that you need help. I think that moms with ADD, women with ADD, we try to take on too much because we've been conditioned from the time we were young girls to be able to handle all of this, be able to run a household, work outside of the home, raise our kids, and it just isn't that easy when you have ADHD, especially if you have kids and kids who have ADHD. So I know I'm talking a lot about this for one question, but it's time to, invent the wheel, that your family is different from other families, your house is going to look different, your kid's backpack is going to look different, your living room, your kitchen is going to look different. So take a step back, reassess, and acknowledge the differences you have versus families who don't have ADHD in the mix.
I think that's probably a really important point of taking on too much. I mean, to your point about us making it more specific, here's a specific question from Gretchen. She says, my ADD son and I need tips on the paperwork monster. We both struggle at home, work, and school with managing a constant influx of paper.
Okay. That's another huge one. And what I would suggest is there's a term that I use, has a home for everything. Once you have a home for everything, the clutter begins to decrease. So what I would suggest is if you have, well, I think she's referring to one child. Let's say you have one or two kids, and they're bringing home papers, and you have ADD, your kid has ADD, the papers are all over the place. Find what I would call a landing spot. So when the child comes in from school, gets into the house, the first thing he or she sees is either a box, a file holder, something that you attach to the wall that holds papers, a folder, and always keep it in the same place. Put their name on it if you have more than one child, and make sure that the first thing, it's almost you have to train, maybe it's not a great word, but train your child. As soon as he walks in the door, put those papers in that area. For papers that need to come home, papers that need to be signed by a parent, papers that might be homework related, have a landing place. And you might need more than one. So there could be one area for just papers coming home and another area for papers that need to get back to school. Now this is, I'm being specific to the child's papers, but the same thing for mom. If you have papers scattered all around, each category needs a home. So if you have bills laying around, you need a file that says bills on it, that every time you get the mail, those bills go straight into a file. And then, there's other steps that lead from there to how you get to paying the bill. That's another whole question.
Do you want to tackle that one, how to pay the bills? I think that's a pretty common problem.
Yeah, again,
paying bills on time.
It's setting up the system. And again, when we talk about executive function is, again, like, how do you lead the orchestra? How do you, know where all the parts belong, what comes in first, what comes in second? But paying the bills is, if you can afford it, I would highly recommend that you hire a professional organizer. I know everybody's probably groaning right now because it's expensive. But a professional organizer, if you're very specific with this person that all you want is a way to set up bill paying, maybe for $100, it would be the best investment if you think about how much you pay from overdrafts and bank, overdrafts, that if you put in the money now to get a system in place, then you'll save a ton of money down the road. If that's totally out of the question, finding someone that you know who is not going to judge you in a negative way, who can help you set up a file system, because there's not just one way of doing it. That's why it's hard to describe it in these sessions, is that everyone has a different style. If you're more of a visual person like many of us with ADD are, you might want to have a moving file cabinet that is not closed but open so that you can see the tabs for every area where you need to pay your bills in your face, because for us, out of sight is often out of mind. Another person might have a little bit of OCD-ish in them and hate the idea of having files open and visually cluttering their view. So they might do better with having files set up in a file cabinet that you can close and not have to look at. So if you can afford a session with an organizer, or if you have a friend who's very organized and can work with you, or a family member who will not criticize or condemn you, you really have to find positive people who are happy to work with you.
That's a great suggestion. In terms of bill paying, have the moms and women with ADHD that you work with, have they often used electronic bill paying? Do you find that that's helpful?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are attracted to online things. Look at all the people here today. And so some of these online programs, which I think you mentioned Mint.com was one of them, Susan?
Yes, Mint.com. That's what
Mint.com was one. But it only works if you're able to remember to get online to do those things. So sometimes we need additional help with paying bills online, which could mean, some type of reminder system. If you're on the computer a lot during the day, there's a lot of computer programs that will remind you to log on or whatever it is you need to do. If you carry your iPhone around or your smartphone, there's programs with beepers that will remind you to do certain things. Banks will often send you reminders that a bill is due. Again, it's finding your style. Are you a computer person? If not, you like paper, reminders and getting those bills in the mail, then there's other strategies you'll need to come up with to help you remember to pay the bills. And again, a lot of that is organization, and we're we find it very difficult to stay organized. So it's hard. I'm not here to say this is easy and that there's a magic wand that's going to make all of this stuff go away. But I'm encouraging all of you to explore new avenues for finding the kind of help that is out there. It's there. You have to find it.
We have two questions that are very similar, so I'll group them together. One's from Heather and one's from Andrea, and they're both about the mornings. Heather says, I have terrible trouble in the mornings, and I find I have emotional outbursts more frequently trying to get my kids ready for school than I do when coping with later in the day. Are there strategies for dealing with the morning? And similarly, Andrea says, mornings and evenings are the drama for me. Waking the kids up and getting them ready and preparing them and getting them to bed is just very difficult with mom and son ADHD and hyperactive. So they both were asking for tips for those morning and evening working hours.
I'd say that was one of my biggest challenges with my daughter with severe ADHD, hyperactivity, impulsivity. She wasn't a good sleeper. She'd be up at 5 in the morning. And then I was a night person, and I couldn't shut down because I was stressed out. If you have someone, a partner at home who can help you, in our case, my husband was the morning person, and I'm the night owl. So it worked out well for us that he took over in the morning, getting the kids up and ready and dressed and breakfast. And I know that's probably rare, but I did luck out. It took a lot of hard work to get this thing figured out, but it finally happened. And then I took the nighttime routine because I am a night owl. So you want to, again, look at what exactly is happening and break it down into parts. For kids who are wild in the morning, which was my case, and also wild at night, I had to readjust her medication. So I'm not a physician, so I can't give medical advice, but you can talk to your child's doctor. A lot of parents will wake up their child about an hour before they need to give them the medication, and then they go back to sleep. And then when they wake up at their regular time, they're medicated and easier, to manage for the morning routine. At nighttime, I had to medicate my daughter because she just couldn't fall asleep, and she was very, once her medication wore off, she was just out of control. So we had to look into additional medication. A lot of parents are uncomfortable with medication, and I think there's a stigma to it, which I would love to, break that stigma, because we don't see that with dealing with diabetes or high blood pressure or other things, but we seem to see it with ADHD and children in particular. But another tip is to, for morning chaos, is to try as much as you can to prepare the night before. So get the backpacks, filled with their school supplies, have lunches made, money set out. And something I've done in recent years that helps, and this is great for older kids, is there's something called a boogie board. It's like a LCD slate, which means you can write on it with a stylus, make notes on it, and when you're done, you push a button and it disappears. And I keep it out on my counter. And every night, because I'm a night person, I write a list of all the things my daughter needs to remember to take to school, because she'll never remember on her own. And then I put a little check box next to each thing. So one will say, backpack, lunch money, electronics, because she brings her iPod to school for the bus ride. And so I have that out on the counter every morning, and it just organizes her day and she's able to pull herself together better. Now, for a younger child, you might want to use pictures and make a poster board and put this poster board, you might need a few of them, like one in the bathroom so that they can have these visual cues to look at and remind themselves, okay, first, wash face, 2, brush teeth, 3, get clothes on. And you might need another poster board like that on the door where they leave to go for the bus with check boxes of what they need to be ready for school, backpack, lunch, and so forth. So I think that this is a huge, huge challenge for moms with ADD who have kids in the morning and the evening. And I have a lot more tips. Another one for moms that I talk about in my presentations is if you're a working mom and you come home, 5, 6 o'clock at night, and then you're walking into the more important job that you have, which is taking care of your family, and you're already exhausted. So my suggestion for getting your second wind is to, and you always tell your family ahead of time when you do these things, is that you need 15 minutes downtime. And even better, if you can stop at a coffee shop like Starbucks on your way home from work, build in that 15 minutes into your day every day so that by the time you get home, you're already, you've caught your second wind, and now you can step into your role as mom and handle, the next step of your day, which is probably even more stressful than your work day.
That's a really good suggestion. You mentioned that your husband was willing to take the morning time, and here's a question from Anne. She says, both my husband and I have ADHD, but I'm the only one taking steps to manage it. I've just started grad school after 4 years at home with our 2 boys, and I'm really struggling having to juggle both school and home, and my husband just doesn't clue into the fact that he needs to, A, take his own medication, and B, become an equal partner in planning and parenting our family. Thanks for any suggestions that you can give me to get my partner on board without having to nag.
Yeah, and that's a tough one because if an adult is not ready to accept his or her ADHD or any other issues that is causing havoc in the family, it's very, very difficult to force that person to get the help they need, to get their act together, to take their medication, whatever it might be. You can leave information out for them to read. More than likely, they're not going to read it. You can scream and carry on, and that only puts more stress on the relationship, which then, makes the whole family time, family life very, very difficult. It's a hard one, Susan. It's really hard to get a partner to acknowledge their own problems and get the help. If everything you do doesn't work, and the next step would be couples therapy, preferably with a therapist that really understands ADHD, because if they don't, sometimes you get some really bad advice. I've seen it over and over again where all of a sudden the therapist might start pointing at the ADD partner, and, it's just very messy sometimes. So if you can find a counselor that is ADD friendly who will, and if your husband is willing to go, that would be the next step. If that doesn't work, or if he refuses to go, then you have to start looking at how can you as a woman, mom, wife, deal with all the things that you're juggling with. You can't do it alone. So if that's the case, you can say to your husband, okay, if you are not able or capable or willing to help me with A, B, C, and D, I will need to get outside help. I think it's imperative that a mom who's feeling drained and overwhelmed by all that she has on her plate, that she stops and takes a look at the situation and stops, banging her head against the wall and reaches out and gets help from the outside. In her case, it could be having someone come in and help more with the children. It could be having someone that helps keep the house in order. And all of these things can be, discussed with the husband in a logical, non-emotional way. A good way to present it would be to say to him, look, this is the problem. What is the solution? It's a great way to talk to men in general. Men like to solve problems. They don't like to deal with emotions. I know that's a generalization, but as a therapist, it's something that I see. So a tip would be to present it to your partner, your husband, as a problem. No emotion. Almost like you're writing it down on a piece of paper. I am going to graduate school. We have 2 kids. The house is a mess. Someone needs to do this, this, and that. And it's a problem. What do you think we can do to make this work better? And I think you might get a better response from him if you present it in that way. In the meantime, if it still doesn't work, then you need to take it upon yourself to go and get those outside resources because you cannot do it alone.
Okay. Questions about school. Lots of folks having problems managing, helping their child, often with ADHD, manage their homework. Here's a funny story from someone who said, once helped my son do a 3-part presentation in an entire weekend. It ended up that he had the date wrong, and we were 3 weeks early. What a stressful weekend. And people say, just going through the planner, keeping track of all the assignments and projects, it's just overwhelming both for their child and for themselves. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it goes back again to what I said earlier, that women with ADHD, we take on too much. There's an interesting thing that I've noticed with men and women, maybe more women, I think, is that we have a hard time saying no. We just take everything on. And again, the social expectations that we were raised with, that we should be able to do it all, and we forget we have the ADD piece going on. And it's reminding yourself over and over that our families are different from others, so we have to find different strategies that work. What I propose to almost every mom that comes to me with this question about homework is to step out of it. Because I tried to do the same thing. I tried to do homework with my daughter, and all it did was really, I wouldn't say destroy our relationship, but it certainly put a tremendous amount of stress in the picture. And the last thing you want is a stressful few hours at the end of the day, because it sets the tone for bedtime. You go to bed feeling angry and irritable and upset. And what you want to do is just the opposite. You want to develop a good relationship with your child. You want to help build that child's self-esteem. That child's already struggling in school, and you need to bring it home with the homework battle. So what I propose to most moms is to step out and find someone to come into the house a few days a week, if possible, to do homework with your child. It could be a high school or a college student. It could be a family member, but it absolutely has to be somebody that understands your child's challenges, who will not demean the child, not pressure the child. So that's one way to look at it from the standpoint of the home. In terms of the school, I don't know how many on this call are aware that many children with ADHD are able to get special services through the schools. And we don't have time to go through the whole thing, but be aware that your child, it's a medical diagnosis, ADHD. And if that child's ADHD impairs them enough that they are not successful in school, then they could be eligible for services under an IEP, which is an individualized educational plan, or a 504, which is a way to give a child accommodations at school. Now, I mentioned this to Susan before this webinar started, that I did something fairly radical. In our case, it may not work for your kids, but maybe it will. And I mentioned earlier, my daughter not only has ADHD, but she has some other special needs. And with the combination, it impacts her in a severe way with academics and school and everything related to school. So I walked into the IEP, this is years ago, and I said, from now on, my daughter does not bring home homework. It has destroyed our home. It has destroyed our family. It has destroyed our relationships. She works hard 7.5 hours every day, and we don't see people in the work field coming home after an 8-hour day and putting in another 3 hours of work at home. Why do we expect our kids to do it? Especially kids that are already challenged and are exhausted from a full day of school. So I requested that in the IEP that it be written that all homework is to be done during school hours. Now, I know all of you are going to get all excited and say, okay, I'm going to do that. Now, it may not work for you, but if you find that it has been a huge problem for your child, you might want to go into the school, into the IEP, and say, okay, we need to really redo some of these expectations you have of my child. So that's one big one, dealing with homework. But another one would be, we can get into that later, since I'm sure some of those questions will come up about in-school problems. But in relationship to homework. See what you can do about getting outside help. Step out of the situation yourself. See what you can do in the school.
That's a great suggestion. Just to make a bit of a segue here, there are a number of people posting who just seem so discouraged. I mean, here's Lisa who says, I just don't know where to start. Just so much clutter. I've lost all desire to make things better, and yet it's all such a source of depression and anxiety for me. And someone else who says, is this ever going to get better? I'm so overwhelmed. And there's just a number of people here who say, I never have any time for myself. I'm always behind the eight ball. Is there any way to change the situation? So just a sense that people have of just not even just so much overwhelmed, so overwhelmed that they can't even get started. Don't know where to start.
Yeah, if you are moms of younger children, I would say to you, yes, it does get better. It's really hard when the kids are young and you have so much to juggle at home with the things that we talked about already, the homework, the behaviors, the clutter, the toys, the clothes, and laundry. I mean, it's huge. It's huge. And it does get better once your children get older. But how to get help now? The things that I've kind of mentioned, getting help for your kids. Don't take it on all yourself. Getting the right treatment. Are you depressed and anxious? Are you getting help for that? Are you on medication for that? Are you seeing a counselor or a therapist for that? These are not luxuries. They're not luxuries to get someone to come in and hang out with your kids a few hours every week so you can have some downtime, or to get out with your friends or your partner or your husband. It's not a luxury. We have to reframe who we are as women with ADHD brains. And our lives are vastly different from those who don't have ADD brains. And so we have to reach out and find these outside resources. We need to connect, like what you're doing right now. You're looking, I'm looking at the screen. I see there's over, hundreds of people here on this call. So you're not alone. You need to reach out and find other people who are dealing with the same things as you are, so that you know that you're not alone, and you can, go back and forth with ideas. Well, what works for you in this? How do you deal with your kids' clutter? Well, I do, X, Y, and Z. How do you do it? So connecting, getting the right treatment, knowing that it does get better as your kids get older, reframing things. There's not going to be a perfect ADD household, and that's not going to make you feel better until you accept that your house is different from your sisters or your mothers or your best friends. So stop trying so hard, accept that there is going to be more clutter in your house, there is going to be more chaos, and try and find the humor. If you can find the humor in some of these situations, like that's what we do in my house. Is when I have an ADD moment, I just, instead of crying, I put my hands up and laugh and say, well, that's my ADD kicking in. Again, it's all of this reframing. Instead of feeling overwhelmed and drowning in it, look at it differently. Take a different attitude. Okay, so you might have a house full of clutter, but what do you have that is going for you? Do you have a loving family, a funny family? Do you have talents? Do your children exhibit different things that, are special to them? Do you have special talents? Focus on those positive things and try not to compare yourself, your children, or your home to others. Connect with other women who have ADHD.
Just coming back to the school for a second, I think connecting with other moms is a great idea. Here's a question from Angela. How do you deal with the school making you feel like a horrible parent because your child isn't perfect or isn't meeting their expectations and they don't learn like other people?
I missed that last part. How do you make the school not feel like you're a horrible parent?
How do you deal with the school making you feel like you're a horrible parent because of your children's difficulties at school? Somehow this is a parenting failure on your part.
Well, that tells me that whoever is doing this at school is just uneducated, totally uneducated about children with special needs, ADHD or otherwise. And so that individual or group of individuals needs to be educated. And you could either offer them information on ADHD, some basic information. There's tons of it online. There's books on it. If that doesn't work, I would go to the next step and talk to the director of special education, explain that they have staff who are treating you in such a way that's demeaning and unprofessional, and explain again that it's obvious to you that this individual needs to be educated about ADHD, and go from there. And if that doesn't work, then you can keep going up to, superintendent of the school board. I would not allow any staff person to act that way towards me. You need to really advocate for yourself, that it has nothing to do with parenting. That's one of the stigmas, again, that women, moms face, that we are doing a bad job with parenting. Well, for many of us, we're just hanging on. We're just surviving. And I had years like that where it was just, getting through a day. And so if you're being judged by a professional, shame on them. Shame on them. And do what you can to educate them, but don't cower. Be proactive and stand your ground, and don't take that kind of behavior. It's almost, abusive.
Definitely, yeah. Here's Cynthia asked this question. My job requires me to work on the computer all day. The Internet is a huge distraction for me. There are times when I go to look something up quick on the Internet and end up 2 hours later down a rabbit hole. Do you have any suggestions on how I can avoid doing this while I'm at work? Thank you.
Yeah, there's actually some programs and I don't have the names of the websites at hand, but if you do a Google search, you'll find them. There are programs that will block websites that, let's say you like to go on Facebook way too many times during a workday. It will block Facebook for a certain period of time. It will even shut down your computer at certain times. So you may need that kind of outside help to force yourself not to get online. Another thing you can do is if you will use a planner, you can write in certain times of the day where it is okay to be online. So let's say on your lunch break, you give yourself 15 minutes to go online, and then you set a reminder to go on, and then set a reminder to get off. That might be too difficult if you're really an addictive kind of person, and the Internet is extremely addicting to people with ADD because it's so stimulating. And so if that's too enticing, forget that, but work with these computer programs that will actually shut you out of sites.
Wow. I guess there's a similar question from someone who asks, what can I do about the fact that I just can't get myself to go to sleep at night? I find myself wasting time in that way that those of us with ADHD are all too familiar with, rather than going to bed even if I'm exhausted. I'm guessing that she's also talking about the Internet, possibly.
Yeah, and it's hard because it takes a lot of self-control to say to yourself, and again, if you can use reminder programs or use your planner or Post-its, whatever it is that you use to organize your day, to write in there, turn off computer. It could be, a Post-it that you put right on your monitor. It could be something you put on the mirror in your bathroom, wherever. Visual reminders are very helpful for people with ADD, if that's, what it is that's preventing her from going to sleep. Another big thing that happens to probably most of us is that our bodies may not be hyperactive, but our minds are. Across the board, I see women who, whether they're hyperactive women or inattentive women, their brains are hyperactive and they can't shut down the brain. So what can you do to start to quiet that active brain is finding quiet, you've probably read this a million times, finding quiet, calming activities in the evening to gradually wind down so that you can sleep. And one way to empty your brain so that you can fall asleep easier is to have a pad of paper next to your bed and start writing down all the things that are bothering you or you're worried that you're going to forget for the next day, and put them on there so you can empty your brain. Certain kinds of meditations are helpful. I know a lot of people say, well, how am I expected to sit for 15, 20 minutes and meditate when I can't even sit still? But studies are showing that meditation is extremely helpful in calming down our brains. Some people do well with exercise, not too close to bedtime, but earlier in the day, and that makes them exhausted and so that they're able to shut down at night. But turning off electronics, turning off everything, finding something really boring to do, and writing down, what's on your mind to empty your mind are all helpful things. Some people swear by a warm glass of milk. My daughter, who has an exceptionally difficult time and has to be on medication, in order to fall asleep, swears by warm orange juice. So every night she takes a glass of orange juice. I don't get it, but it works for her. She warms up a glass of orange juice, and that seems to help her. A warm bath, a hot shower, getting into a routine. And it's very difficult to do in the beginning, but if you can force yourself to get into that habit, it takes, I think I read somewhere that for someone with ADD, it takes about twice as long to develop a new habit versus a non-ADD person. So give yourself a lot of time to do it, and the reward will be you'll feel so much better and refreshed the next day.
Great suggestions. Here's a question from Melissa. My 15-year-old teen daughter just doesn't want my help. She's floundering in school, she's always late, and she's starting to have stress-related illnesses. What can I do?
Well, I would wonder if your daughter is getting treated for her ADHD. First of all 15-year-olds are crazy. That's all 15-year-old daughters are insane, crazy, and horrible to live with, from what I see from my own experience. So you have to sort of accept that part of that is just the way it goes. But if she has ADHD and she's stressing out, not feeling good, having illnesses, and doing poorly in school, this is a child that I would say needs some professional help, especially before it spirals into a worse situation as she gets older, and she's smack into high school years now. So you want to acknowledge, the difficulty between mother and daughter is normal for this age, but getting outside help. If she refuses to go, then you go as a parent to get help on how to help your daughter.
That's probably a good suggestion. Here's a question. How do you help your children develop good social skills and learn how to make and keep good friends when you don't really know how to do that yourself?
It's another great question. There's not enough out there, in my opinion, that helps, especially adults, even kids, but to help adults learn better social skills. There's a fabulous book out by Dr. Michelle Novotny. It's spelled Novotni.
N-I, right.
Yeah. And she wrote a book, I think it's titled, What Does Everybody Know That I Don't? I'm pretty sure that's the title. You can get it on Amazon. And it's an exceptional book, and it's the only book I've ever seen out there. There's new books that are starting to come out that address this for kids and adults with Asperger's, but we don't see much of this for ADD. So I would look into that book to help yourself with social skills. Again, I keep talking about the counselor, finding someone who understands ADD or social skills. Those are just kind of hard to find. And then for the child, if you go to the school and there are social workers on staff, I would talk to the social worker and ask the social worker to help you and help your child. If your child has an IEP, you can request an evaluation by the social worker to work specifically with social skills. But at home, once you are learning, appropriate behaviors yourself, you can then have your child model them for your child by practicing different behaviors, like how do you meet somebody new, and then you can practice at home with someone like you hold out your hand, you give good eye contact, you say, hi, how are you? Those kinds of things. But again, like the person said, it starts with the parent. The parent needs to learn these skills too, but for the child, first to go into the school and contact the social worker.
Tanya asks, how do you fight the feeling if I can't do it perfectly right now, I'm just going to wait until I can, and that day just never comes? So procrastination / perfectionism, which is, I think, pretty common to those of us with ADHD.
It's very common, and it's a really hard thing to deal with. And it's almost like we overthink things sometimes. Like, let's say you want to put these pictures in a photo album. Well, first of all, that's an overwhelming thought, at least for me, because it's just, first you got to find the photos, then you got to find the right album, then you got to figure out, do we do it by date? Do we do it by each kid in the family? How, and then we get so overwhelmed, we shut down, and we just put the whole thing away. So we see that a lot with what you said as, ADHD and perfectionism. And one way to deal with that is just to jump in. stop the overthinking, stop the analyzing. Easier said than done, obviously. But think about, being a little bit impulsive, which, you wouldn't think I would be encouraging impulsivity, but I'm encouraging it in this situation. It's just jump in. If that still seems too frightening for you, then, getting the help of a loyal friend or a family member who understands how your brain operates and asking them to help you. But Ned Hallowell talks about doing things just good enough, and I've thought that was the greatest way to put it. When people were asking him, well, how can I keep up my house? Everything is so disorganized. I can't get things done. And he preached it, and I really held on to those words. All you need is to do it good enough so that you know where things are. You're not putting you or yourself or your family in any kind of danger by having, rotten food in the refrigerator or whatever. It's just doing it good enough. And again, not comparing yourself with others.
In terms of not being able to get started because you don't have you want the perfect, one of the things that's worked for me, and I wondered if you've seen this, Terry, is this 15-minute rule. Just say, well, I can't do this entire thing perfectly, but I can do it for 15 minutes, and to put on a timer and sort of get started that way. Is that
That's a great one, Susan. It's a great one because
procrastination or perfectionism or both, or I'm not sure what it deals with, but it does help.
It really does help, and what you usually find is that then you can't stop. You start for 15 minutes, and then you can't stop. My ADD action team group, we do a lot of this stuff where people will come into the group online, and they'll say, I need to, let's say, pay the bills, and they're stuck. So we encourage them to just maybe even less than 15 minutes can seem overwhelming to some people. So we might say, just spend 5 minutes gathering up the bills and putting them in a folder. Just spend 5 minutes. And that leads them to want to go on and continue into the next phase of paying bills. So I think that's a great tip, Susan, and I use that myself.
Terry, we are approaching the dreaded holiday season, which I think I can say with great assurance for ADD moms is nothing short of a nightmare. The number of tasks involved, the time frame, the social obligations, the shopping, packing, it's really pretty overwhelming. Do you have any tips or suggestions for approaching the holiday season?
Yeah, it's called Boston Market. Well, I am way ahead. I've been in this field for a long time. I've been dealing with my own ADD for many, many years, and it takes people a long time to, and I've talked about it earlier, to reframe who we are, how we do things, and we have to make new accommodations for ourselves. So the expectation of having, 24 people over, and I relate a story. I don't have time to do it today, but I relate a story about just this topic, having Thanksgiving dinner at my house. I couldn't do it. I tried, and it all kind of fell apart. So changing the rules, making new traditions. Just because your mother had a house full of people and had a perfectly laid out table with a roast turkey and all the sides doesn't mean that you have to do it the same way. Find out what works for you. In my case, honest to God, for years now, I order it out. I tell people to make a reservation. Why take this on and make yourself so stressed out that you don't enjoy the holiday? What is the purpose of the holiday? Is the purpose of the holiday to have a perfect turkey on your table? To have mashed potatoes come out the way, your grandmother made them? No, the purpose of the holiday, in my book, is to be together with family and enjoying the time together and remembering what the specific holiday is about. It's not about the perfect table setting. So if it means a reservation, if it means asking people to bring in the food that they cook and you provide, the house and the cutlery and all that sort of thing, that's great. But it's time for us as women with ADHD to shift our self-perceptions, and make the holidays work for us and our families so that you can finally enjoy this day with your friends and family.
How about the shopping part?
The shopping part.
Gift shopping part and the Christmas card, holiday card part. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Online. I think that doing things online is a lot easier. I haven't even talked anything about sensory issues in women, which is a huge interest of mine. But a lot of women with ADHD don't realize that one of the reasons why they shut down, especially during holidays, is that they are on sensory overload. They're going to malls and being bombarded with fragrances and music piping in and people rushing around. And it gets to a point where many of us have actual panic attacks in the malls. And I used to until I realized, and I learned about ADHD. Well, I was just being sensory assaulted. So what I do now is do about 99% of my shopping online so I can avoid the malls. With cards, there's services online where you can just input a person's name and address one time and click a button and they will spew out, holiday cards to your friends and families for you. So that's one way to get around it. Another question is to ask yourself, is it that important for me to do holiday cards? Will everyone hate me if I don't do it? What about just picking up the phone and wishing someone a happy holiday or shooting them off a quick email and saying, I'm thinking of you? I mean, again, it's breaking tradition and figuring out strategies that work for you and your ADHD. But I think online shopping is huge. I think it really helps us with not feeling so overwhelmed with the holiday season and all the people running in the shopping malls.
Right. One thing that I can't remember which of our writers or coaches recommended this, but I found it very helpful, and that is to buy, starting at Thanksgiving, to buy one gift every day online until you finish your list.
I love that.
So you just sort of, it's that breaking it into small pieces.
Yeah.
So you just every day, you start with Friday after Thanksgiving, again, online, not going into any giant overwhelming stores that you just move down your list till you're done.
You can also buy more things that you intended to buy so that you have it for next season, but then the problem is when you put them away, you generally forget.
You can't find them. Right.
I've done that.
And then I guess the other thing that we've had a number of articles of attitude about the holiday season because it's just such a hot point for so many of our readers. We do actually even have a worksheet that was developed for one of our articles, which is how to actually help you set your family's priorities with sort of where everybody can weigh in and say, because we can't do everything. Yes, it's really important to us to have family time at home, or we'd rather all go on a vacation than do that, or, sort of go through and prioritize for the holiday. What is the goal? What's the family goal? And to just focus on that and narrow it down rather than trying to be all things to all people. But yeah, I feel it coming and I feel the pit in the bottom of my stomach. I
think we all do. We all do.
I think we really do. There's a couple of questions here, and they're interesting, from people. One's Julie, who say, I'm really creative, and, isn't there too much structure? Don't we just need a day off? Isn't there too much structure in life? Do we really have to be focused so much on structure? And, I'm wondering, what's your thought about that? Is this just avoidance, or is this a healthy reaction to the things coming at us in life?
I think it's a healthy reaction. This person's a creative person. They think outside of the box, and to them, being too structured might be stifling. Creativity is looking outside of the box. And for creative people, and a lot of people with ADHD seem to be creative types. They seem to just kind of take it all in. They may get overwhelmed, but they also may have very great outlets in creative ways to express themselves. So for that particular person, I think that's a great point, that if your day is overly structured, then what's wrong with taking a day off and doing what you like in a time frame that works for you? I think it's a great idea.
Okay, that's great. I think we're pretty much coming to the end of our time here. Is there any last word, Terry, that you have maybe on time management? This is, I guess, one of the few questions we haven't really addressed from Tracy. Any suggestions on time management during the day? I just have a really difficult time judging the actual length of time things take.
Yeah, I worked with a number of people who had that exact problem, that exact question. And so what I recommended was to find what those areas of those problem areas were, and time them. So let's say if you find that getting ready in the morning takes longer than you expected and you don't know where you're going wrong with that, get a pencil and paper and time it. How long does it take for you to shower? How long does it take for you to put your makeup on and get dressed and all those sort of things? And start analyzing your data, so to speak. And can some of those things be done differently? Can you maybe shower the night before? Are there shortcuts to getting, your clothes together? Maybe getting them put together the night before. So analyzing the data by writing all the steps down for those problem areas so that you can see in black and white where things are not going right for you. And then some strategies beyond that would be using, there are watches out there that vibrate and beep and even send you messages to help you stay on target with time management related problems. So another thing would be like if you're always late for work, that's a big one. I think what we forget is that we think about what time we need to be at work. So if you need to be at work at 9, you need to start thinking back, well, what time do I have to leave the house? Forget about what time you have to be at work. What time do you have to leave the house and focus on that? We all, not all, but many of us forget to think of it in those terms. So using watches that have beepers to remind you, okay, it's time to get started on your morning routine. It's time to stop and get on to the next thing, to transition. A transition is also really hard for us to do. And then there are even, these are really cool. There's the suction cup clocks that you can put in your shower. So if you're a daydreamer and you're in the shower too long, you can have these clocks in your shower so that you can keep tabs of how long you've been in that shower and what time you need to get out to get ready for work. They're really cool, and they help for kids too.
Wow, that's a great suggestion. So, Terry, I can't thank you enough for the work that you do and for today's session. They're super helpful.
Well, thanks for having me, Susan, and good luck to everybody. And I'm thrilled to have seen you today.
Great. Thanks again.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.